AV Shop Talk, Episode 20.
Podcasting from Boston, Massachusetts and
Denver, Colorado.
This is AV Shop Talk, covering the latest audiovisual trends and emerging technologies. This is where the AV pros come to talk shop. With your hosts, Nate Schneider and Jason Griffin.
Welcome to the AV Shop Talk podcast. I am pleased to introduce to you Jason Griffin. He is back from his trip, his road trip.
I am back. It's been just a crazy 4 or 5 weeks here. I'm happy to be back recording with you tonight. I had a lot going on, but definitely was excited to sit down and do another episode with you, Nate.
Yeah, so last time we chatted, you were in Los Angeles, and in that time period, you have driven how many times across the Mojave Desert exactly?
Yeah. So I'm in Denver now. I think we've alluded to that a couple times, but in case anybody's listening who may not have caught that before, I relocated with my wife and our young daughter to Denver, Colorado. And, for a number of reasons that I won't go into here, we just decided that logistically it was best to kind of do the move, at least for me, in two parts. And so I did the drive once the first time with a buddy of mine who flew out from Denver, and we hopped in the U-Haul and strapped one of my cars to the back and did the drive, and it just turned into an absolute nightmare of a drive. And
forest fires and hills.
A massive brush fire that broke out in California, and it closed down the I-15, which is the main corridor there between LA and Vegas.
Jeez.
And of course the road that we had to get on. But, I was of course thankful because we couldn't have been more than maybe 30 minutes behind a group of cars where actually I think about 20 or maybe 30 cars got burnt up in the fire. And I think, what I heard thankfully is that nobody got injured, which seems kind of like a minor miracle based on some of the footage I saw. But in any event, that closed down the freeway, and we had to take just a massive detour, and ended up also on top of that getting a flat tire on the truck during our drive, and between all of that and then the truck just being like completely overloaded and heavy and just doing very slow speeds uphill and stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple hills on that route, I believe. Little continental divide.
It was pretty brutal. It took us 26 hours to do the drive, and that's with no stops other than, of course, gas and bathroom breaks and stuff. Just to give you an idea to kind of put that in perspective, I flew back and kind of did the final cleaning and tied up some odds and ends and jumped in our second car and did the drive actually with my mom, who flew out. And on that second time, we did the drive in 16 hours.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
So that first drive was a nightmare. And we're here getting settled, though. And then I had a family vacation that had been on the calendar a long time before I had even decided I was going to move. And we had kind of actually planned the move around that to sort of have it done prior to vacation, which turned out to be a very, very good decision. So we just got back from a week up in Idaho near Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and just had a great time up there with family. So it's just been a very eventful 4 or 5 weeks here, but excited to kind of be getting back into the rhythm, and going to be starting a new job here in Denver with a company called Harrison Home Systems that I'm very excited about. We'll be doing, sales and business development for them, and really excited for the opportunity and ready to get kind of back into the podcasting groove as well.
Well, good for you. So business development. So from project manager at VIA to business development at Harrison, huh?
Yep, you got it. Yeah, they're it's a smaller operation. I mean, coming from VIA on the residential side, pretty much any company you go to is going to be a smaller operation. I think VIA is probably the largest player on the residential side. If not, they're definitely right up there.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a really great company that I'm super excited about, a husband and wife team that own it. And, they're doing very well here in Denver, and they're looking to grow aggressively. This is a very hot market right now. There's a lot of opportunity here, and they felt like I might be the right person to come in and help them grow. And I feel really excited for the opportunity. So I think it's a hopefully a win-win, and I'm ready to get started.
Great. Maybe we can do some business development for the podcast too, and see if anybody wants to do some business with us. And just throwing that out.
You got it. Hey, it all ties together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, real quick, wanted to say thank you to everybody who's listening that downloaded episode 19, the Infocom Experience. That was by far our most popular episode yet. So, just really thank you so much for taking the time to download and share with an AV buddy or an AV colleague or just someone you know that's in the industry. So it looks like that's what people did, because it got way more attention than anything else we've put out there yet. So that was really encouraging and cool to see. And
it was a great episode. I think I tweeted out at one point and wanted to echo it on air that definitely appreciate you kind of shouldering some of the extra load while I was out running around the country and getting my life sort of situated. And I listened to the episode and really enjoyed it. I think you did a great job with it, and I'm happy to see that the numbers sort of at least seem to reflect that our audience kind of felt the same way. And so I'll echo your sentiment there and thank everybody for listening.
Yeah, no, that was a fun one. Thanks, Jason. Definitely was a lot of editing, but definitely worthwhile. And it's fun to try new things and just see where it goes. But with that, speaking of new things, I remember back in 2009, it was either 2008, 2009, this little social media platform called LinkedIn came about. Do you remember that, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. You got it.
So I was I was working at an integration company in Waltham, Massachusetts at the time. And I remember being blown away that I could connect with my coworkers. And I was brand new to the industry. At that point, only had a couple years under my belt as an intern and as low level, entry level employee. And I could see the work history that, so-and-so worked at this company for a couple years, then bounced over here and then worked there. And then that was fascinating for me to be able to see the history, work history, career history of my colleagues. And with this episode, we're going to do that same type of deep dive, but in person. So we've got a fun episode in store with Victoria Ferrari. And we're going to put the career spotlight on her and just kind of hear her story about how she made her way through the industry and some different changes that came about. And, without any further ado, Jason, unless you got something else, why don't we jump right on into the interview with Victoria?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that I enjoyed the conversation. And I think that, the kind of takeaway here is that this industry is full of possibilities. And we really enjoyed kind of hearing her journey through the industry. And I hope that everybody else enjoys it. And like you said, without further ado, we'll jump right in here to our conversation with Victoria Ferrari.
AV Shop Talk.
I am pleased to welcome Victoria Ferrari to the AV Shop Talk podcast. How are you doing tonight, Victoria?
Great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. We're looking forward to, kind of diving into your story and how you got into the industry and just kind of tapping into, that whole history about how the evolution of a, AV professional, how that career evolves over time. And I think you've got an interesting story. And, we'll just start off with a quick intro for our audience. Now, currently, you are the account executive or an account executive for Synergy CT out of Houston, Texas. And you are the holder of a couple certifications, the CTS, which is probably the most common one that most people know about. Then there's the ISFC and the EAVA certifications. Now, Victoria has had blog posts featured on Commercial Integrator, and she's very active on social media. So, of course, those are the types of people we like to interview for the podcast, or folks that are throwing themselves out there on social media. And when was it that we first met? It was when Chris Netto was putting together the Red Band group. Was that in 2012, 2013?
Yeah, around in that time frame. And I think you and I exchanged some tweets. You had put something out about the moon, the
super
lunar.
moon.
Yes, the super moon. That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm kind of a geek like that, and like to do time lapse of the oh geez, I can't even the perigee moon. I think the technical name for it is. Oh man, I hope I didn't mess that up now. But yeah, a couple times a year, there's like a moon that's like super. It's even bigger. So yeah, I like to sit out in a field somewhere and try to capture that. But oh, that's funny. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I think
And
that
here
was
we are.
our first tweet exchange was about the moon.
Wow, look at you going back in the history books, coming up with that. That's pretty neat. So I was going to mention that we were in an AV selfie at Infocom 15 down in Orlando. So I was going to tweet that out. Dig that one back up again. But great. So
Yep, we had that too. And I think you had to like squat all the way down so that like we were both in the picture.
yeah, a
'Cause
little bit of a height difference.
I think you're like 2 feet taller than me, at least.
Yeah. Well, hey, they don't call me Big Nate for no reason, right? That's kind of that's the name that just kind of stuck over time. So, well, good. Well, good. You can find Victoria at Victoria0429 on Twitter, and let's jump on into how you got started and just kind of do a little career spotlight. And before we get into that, I wanted to ask you a question to kind of kick things off. And what piece of advice would you give to someone who's maybe new to systems integration or looking to start a career, maybe in sales or the path that you went down?
So that's a great question. I would say, probably the single best piece of advice I ever got was learn the technology. Immerse yourself in it and continue to learn and have an open mind, of what's out there. And no matter what role in the industry, whether you're on the manufacturer side, the manufacturer rep side, the integrator side, it's really beneficial to have the tech knowledge and to be able to, be well-rounded and you can have a conversation with anyone, end users, consultants, no matter who you run into. If you have a good working knowledge, that keeps you really well-rounded. The other thing I would say in relation to that is play with the technology, get demos, try stuff out for yourself. There's only so much you can get off of a data sheet. When you actually plug something in, test it out, program it, see what it can do, that really adds value.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it just happens time and time again when, I'm designing stuff, for image stream. You read the spec sheets over and over and over again, but it's not till you get the thing in-house, unbox it, start putting things together, you realize, oh, geez, this thing doesn't quite fit the way I thought it would, or, the spec sheet kind of fudged the specs just a little bit, and now we need this adapter or something like that. So
Yep.
totally agree. Now, I didn't have this in the notes, but so these certifications that you have, I think one from Extron and one from Infocom, and the other one from what does ISF stand for? Is that the I can't remember the science.
Imaging Science Foundation.
Imaging Science Foundation, and that's the is it the Braun father and son group? That's their group, right? I've met them before.
So they're part of it, but I think officially it's run by Joel Silver. He's a veteran in the industry.
Okay.
Him and one other guy, but I think the Braun Consulting, they're involved in that, and they, I can't remember which one.
So I had to get my facts straight and look this one up. Joel Silver is the president and founder of the ISF, as Victoria pointed out, and he's also involved in teaching for the course for ISF, the proper certification. And then Alan and Jonathan Braun are on the board of directors for the ISF C certification. So they're involved with teaching for the C certification of the Imaging Science Foundation. So if somebody was starting off, they're starting a career in Pro AV or systems integration, which one of those certifications would you recommend to get first?
CTS, for sure. So the Imaging Science Foundation was a really fun certification. I really enjoyed learning they really teach you about the human eye and, about light and how different technologies project light. Talks about image contrast and all this really awesome stuff. I took it a long time ago, so I don't remember everything. And the one thing about it is you don't really have to renew it. It's like once you're ISF, you're always ISF. It teaches you how to calibrate displays, how to calibrate projectors. So it was really fun. I liked learning about that kind of stuff. The EAVA is just Extron's AV associate. It's a good cert to get and to have. But the CTS is really the most comprehensive certification, I would say.
Yeah, I know that CTS is really designed to kind of give you a well-rounded knowledge of the industry, and that's probably to Nate's question. I would agree with you. Not that I'm a CTS holder, but definitely the one that probably, if you're just starting out, that's probably the one you want to look at. I was curious when I saw ISF on here, and I know, I don't want to jump the gun here too much because I know we're going to jump into kind of talking about your sort of trajectory through the industry and kind of some of your past jobs, and then of course what you're doing now. I was curious with the ISF certification. I mean, that's a big thing. Me being a residential guy, we do a lot of very high-end home theater, and so I was very familiar with ISF. Is that something that you kind of did for maybe a previous role in your industry, or is that something that you're currently utilizing now, or maybe a little bit of both? Like, I'm just curious to know a little bit more about that certification.
Sure. I have to say about the certification, I probably didn't get the full value out of it because I didn't go to a class. I just did, the online version. And I did it back in 2012, I think, or 2011. And I just had heard about it when I was working with Stewart Film Screen and thought, it would help me in when I had a focus on projection. But I don't really necessarily use any of it in what I do now. My engineers, my techs and stuff are the ones that do the actual calibrations and things like that online or on site. Yeah.
Well, like you alluded to early in the conversation, this is one of the fun things that I think I can say for myself and what I gathered from what you were saying. And one of the things we enjoy about working in AV is that it's a constant learning process. And what we're doing and the tools that we're working with on a daily basis is constantly evolving over the years. And I think that speaks to that. So to that point, maybe now's a good time to jump in, Victoria, to just talking about where you got started in the industry. I know you have an interesting story, and why don't we just kind of rewind and jump right back to the beginning and what was your first job in Pro AV?
Sure. So it was a warm, sunny day in 1999. No, just kidding. So I had just graduated high school, and I was looking for a job. I had decided to take time off. I wasn't going to jump straight into college. I needed a break from the whole school thing. I really didn't enjoy high school. I enjoyed learning at high school, but high school is high school. And so, right. So I was like, I'm not sure really what I want to do exactly. So I'll just, I'll work for now. And I was going to school as well. I was taking some college classes, but I didn't, jump right into full-time college. So I started for a company in Tucson, Arizona, was where I was raised and grew up. And I was the receptionist for a company named Beckler. And they just so happened to be an AV manufacturer. And, I knew that I like to learn, and I like to learn new things and try, new things. And so when I started with them, I was a receptionist, but I started helping out with the sales and marketing team there. And really, just kind of got thrown into learning about technology. And as soon as, I got the chance to really start understanding this hardware, this piece of hardware that we were manufacturing, it was so interesting to me. And, I would go in the back in our production area, and I would see like our people, with soldering irons and all these different things. And it was just so cool to be on the sales side and understand, what this product does for a customer, but to see it starting out as a blank, circuit board that gets populated was really cool. And so I also had my boss who was working there at the time. She was the outside salesperson, and we were a small company, so she would also take technical support calls when she was in the office. And whenever I heard her, going through these troubleshooting steps and talking to integrators who were out in the field trying to, help them get their systems going and integrated properly, that was interesting to me. And I was like, wow, I want to be like her. I remember thinking that, like, man, she helps these people, get this stuff figured out, and it's so cool.
Now, you said, let me jump in for a second. You said the name of the company was Beckler. Is it still known by that name, or is there a product that it's more, associated with at this point?
Yeah, so the company name is Beckler, but the product and what everyone knows them as is Point Maker.
Okay. Did they change the name of the company, or?
No.
Okay.
No,
I was poking around on their website, and I had trouble finding Beckler anywhere. It seemed like it was Point Maker, Point Maker, Point Maker. So that's kind of like that's their claim to fame, right?
Yeah. So the company has actually a couple different segments. One of their parts is not even in the AV industry, so it's pretty cool. It's very diverse.
And Point Maker, to me, looks like it's an interesting product, and I think it's one that a lot of people will understand and maybe kind of give them a light bulb moment here. So maybe tell our audience a little about what the Point Maker product actually is.
Sure. So the Point Maker is a hardware-based annotation device. Basically, it's a piece of hardware that takes video in, video out, and allows you to annotate and draw over the images using a peripheral device like a USB touchscreen or a Wacom tablet, USB based. Back when I was there, it was they were drawing over composite video and S video.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it was but no one else could do that. That's what was so cool about it, because Smart Technologies was out there, but you had to have a smart board, you had to have a PC, and it had to run the software. Mm-hmm. Where the Point Maker could draw over video, live video.
So I just want to put in people's minds, think John Madden, 1990s Monday Night Football, telestrator type stuff, that's kind of like what this was doing. It allowed TV broadcasters. I mean, there's other uses for it too, but that was kind of like the big thing, right? It allowed TV broadcasters to draw over live TV broadcasts, to circle a lineman who was about to get decked or whatever,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we did have John Madden was using Point Maker for some years on Monday Night Football.
I wish I could do a Madden impression. Jason, you got one?
Boom!
That's pretty good.
That's the best I got. Sorry.
I'm not going to embarrass myself, but I wish I practiced that ahead of time. I would have came up with something ridiculous.
Yeah, we missed that one.
And the other big thing was courtrooms, right? That was where Point Maker was used. Yeah.
So it's a long story. I won't get into it, but basically we were written into the court, the official federal court specification for technology. So, and it was written, you got to have annotation that goes over video. And at the time, we were really the only solution. And so it really got, into the courts, and it's now still to this day spec'd into almost all federal courtrooms.
And the O.J. Simpson trial, was the big, was that the first big case where that was used, or is that just the first big, notable one, or?
Yeah, that was one of the first big cases. And the president of the company, Pat Bray, he was actually there at the courthouse, and because of security reasons, he had to set up the technology and then tear it all down and then set it back up the next day and then tear it all down. It was crazy.
And are they still, is PointMaker still out there putting out product? I have to imagine it's evolved quite a bit since it first started, but I know we see this kind of technology everywhere when we watch, live sports and all kinds of TV now. So they're still around doing this?
Yeah, they are. Definitely the product has evolved somewhat. They have where you can interface with an iPad, and they're really targeting K through 12 solutions, environments. And they're still out there, still making products.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think it just is a perfect example of innovation, and now it kind of seems commonplace, but back when that first came about, that really kind of filled a void and solved a problem for people, and really kind of took off. And I think that was probably an interesting time, to work at that company, and probably gave you a lot of good insights and experience in the industry. What was kind of your next step after that? Because obviously, as we've alluded to, you're not still with the company. So what, kind of where did you go from there?
Yeah. And so you started off as a receptionist, you quickly transitioned into a sales role. And then from there, as Jason just asked, your career changed. And so tell us what happened next.
Sure. So after 6 months being the receptionist, I got promoted to sales and marketing, and did start taking over those technical support calls, and really, got immersed in the industry. And what was cool about the PointMaker product was that because it sat in the middle of the video flow, there was sources, and then there was PointMaker, and then there was display in the most simplest form. But with the integrators were putting it in with matrix switchers, and they had to use RS-232 extenders for the touchscreens. And so I got to learn about Extron switchers and Crestron control and all these different things that connected to the PointMaker. So that was one unique thing about working for that type of manufacturer. I was really exposed to a lot of things in the industry. I was there for 5 years, and then my husband and I, we decided to move. We wanted to make a move to a bigger city, and because Tucson was small, and so we moved to Houston. This was in 2005, I believe.
Okay.
We moved to Houston, and I got a job at an IT integrator, an IT consultant integration firm. It was eye-opening, to say the least. After the first year, I was really missing the AV industry.
Oh, wow.
My role at the IT integrator was I was a support person. I didn't get exposed too much to the technology because in that industry, they really separate the salespeople and the engineers. The salespeople aren't quite as technical as the AV salespeople. And I was in inside sales, so I was even one step further removed. But I learned general concepts. I learned about network topology, and I definitely knew like Cisco part numbers off the top of my head. I knew them by heart from back then, phones, and there was tons of, network security products. And what I learned there, though, I worked there after 2 years. I was promoted to the inside sales manager. And so I managed a team of 8 people, and managing people is really hard.
Yeah, I've heard. I've not had to do it yet.
It definitely had its challenges. But I really, felt like, again, I had mentors, in place, people that kind of encouraged me and helped me stretch and helped me, take chances in my career that I may not have done, if I didn't have a little encouragement.
Yeah. Okay. So something you said was interesting. You said you missed the AV industry after going to the IT world. Was it something about like the company culture or the business model or the type of business? Like what, like, if you could put your finger on it, like what do you think it was?
So I'm glad you asked that. It's the IT industry where I was, at least. It seemed like it was so cutthroat. You know, it was like we would do anything and everything we could to win a job from a competitor. You know, and not that it was anything unethical, but it was just so cutthroat. And you know, even the manufacturers that sold similar products were also, you know, just so like against each other. Where in the AV industry, you may rub elbows with your competitor, you know, at an Infocom or at a, you know, little regional show, but everyone's still cordial, you know, and everyone is willing to discuss ideas and talk about, you know, how they solve problems. And also the AV industry is much smaller, so you know, you know a lot more people, or IT is just huge. You couldn't even get to know everyone in your city, probably. But so yes, that was the big difference there.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to I think it was the first episode of this year, we had Ernie Beck on the show, and we talked about the group that he does called Integrate Baltimore, and it's basically a meetup that they do once a quarter with, you know, anyone who's in integration. Could be an end user, it could be a fierce competitor, but everybody just still gets together and has drinks and appetizers, and you know, like maybe that's like a unique thing to, you know, the pro AV world that other industries don't necessarily get to experience. So maybe I don't know. I'm just kind of reflecting on that based on what you said, and kind of thinking like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, I think that because of what we do, because, you know, you can take a room and you could design it 10 different ways depending on what the customer's needs, and, you know, maybe your favorite audio system or your favorite, you know, control system, or maybe there's a small integrator that only knows AMX, so they only put in AMX. You know, I think there's definitely an artistry and a creativeness that goes into what we do. And so that makes us kind of want to, you know, collaborate with each other and talk about, oh, how do you solve this problem? Or, you know, what have you seen in this situation? Where the IT world is kind of more cut and dry. You know, it's like almost anyone can, you know, put a server online and run software, you know? So I think the AV integrators bring another level of, you know, creativity and artistry, and that kind of maybe is what brings us together. I don't know.
Cool. Yeah. So after gaining like 5 years experience now, were you in the IT world for 5 years?
Yeah, it was about 4.5, 5. Yeah.
4.5 years. And so then you went back into AV, and you actually went back to Beckler again. So what was that experience like?
Yeah. So Pat Bray, the president of Beckler, called me up and, you know, said, "Hey, I have a position for you, and do you want to move back to Tucson?" And it was a national sales manager. And so I would, you know, get to travel. I'd get to lead the sales and marketing team over there. And so it was definitely, you know, very appealing to me. And again, we packed up and moved back from Houston to Tucson.
Yep.
Both places are really hot, by the way, just in different ways. So yeah, and I learned a ton at my second stint at Beckler. You know, I would travel. I traveled more than I had previously in any other role, and but it wasn't too much. You know, it was like about 25%. I think I did like maybe 1 or 2 trips a month, and I would just go out and visit integrators and consultants and just call on people. And, I met a lot of people. And it was like a whirlwind. It was a blur. Those 3 years, just went by so fast. It was a lot of work. Beckler was still a small company, and so there was a lot of hats. I was involved in planning trade shows and attending trade shows, and designing a booth and going and setting it up, and then working the booth at long shows like NAB is like 5 days.
I love this. I love this story though, because it's a lot of times I know in my day-to-day work, I'll be out at a job site and there might be a gentleman from some other trade, say an electrician or, even sometimes a painter or drywaller who might come up and ask, they kind of see what we do as AV pros and integrators, and they're impressed by it and they want to know more about it and how you kind of get into this industry and how we're able to do what we do. And I think the assumption a lot of times is that you have to really, get some advanced schooling or whatever it is. And I always tell people, and I think you're a perfect example of that, is like, really this industry is about getting that first position and then applying yourself, right? And being dedicated to your craft and your trade and being willing to learn. And I think just to kind of see your trajectory to come, you start as a receptionist and then get offered a job as a national sales manager. I think that's awesome. I'd be curious to know if you could maybe, I don't want to ask you to toot your own horn too much, but if you had to maybe point to one or two things about your work ethic or personality that you think, led the owner of that company to call you back and offer you that position, like what would you say that was?
Definitely, I'm type A, make to-do lists and be organized. But more than anything, I worked hard. As a small company, we had to wear a lot of hats. And so we had to, I had to think on my feet and be able to adapt to situations and, not ever look at anything that I was tasked with as that I was above it. Just work hard and, try to contribute in every way that I could. And there was some nights where it was late nights working hard.
Yep.
And
yeah, absolutely.
So I think, that I know it sounds so cliche, but hard work always pays off. I really think that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think kind of in your last, when you were speaking before, I think you mentioned the number 3 years. Was that the amount of time that you served kind of as the national sales manager?
Yes. Yeah.
And then from there, your next step was a company that actually I'm as a residential guy doing high-end home theater, a company that I'm very familiar with, I believe at least, was Stewart Film Screen. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Very nice. And what drew you to that company, and what did you do there?
Sure. So I also I always knew that Stewart was very high-end projection screen material. My husband has worked in residential AV as well and has always said for years that Stewart was the best, one of the best. And our manufacturer's rep, Beckler's manufacturer's rep in Texas was Total Marketing. And Stewart and Beckler were both repped by Total Marketing for years, for like 20 years. And so we were always rubbing elbows with the Stewart people. And, their screens, their technology was always in display at shows and stuff. And I didn't know anything really about projection. It was one of the things I knew a little bit, but nothing about, foot candles and foot Lamberts and lumens and
yes, we got foot Lamberts into this episode. It's a successful episode.
Lux and illuminance and okay. I'll stop. But and so it was an area in AV that I was interested in exploring. I wasn't particularly looking necessarily for Stewart, but I was, looking for another position. And because once again, my husband and I kind of got stir crazy in Tucson, in the small town. And, we're thinking maybe we move back to Houston because that's where my husband's family was, or maybe, we had our options open. And so I was looking for a job really anywhere. And I found the Stewart Film Screen posting on LinkedIn, on the CTS LinkedIn group. And so I was like, oh, wow. And the position was actually for consultant liaison on the East Coast. And I was like, well, that sounds right up my alley. I was like, I've been calling on consultants, for the last 3 years, and I know several consultants, and I could have a little bit of an in there, So started the interview process, and it was interesting. It was I had several phone interviews with Joaquin. I don't know if you know him.
I do.
Yeah.
Not closely, but yeah, I definitely know Joaquin.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I was so excited. Then they flew me to LA, and as soon as they showed me the factory and, seeing the Stewart factory in person, I don't know if you've ever been there.
I have.
Okay. So it was so cool. I was like, wow, this is, an area of AV that I don't know, that I'd love to learn more about. And, I have the ends with some of the consultants. And, but what ended up happening was they already had another candidate that they were talking to for the East Coast, but they really liked me. And so they said, hey, why don't you come be our rep for the West Coast? And I was like, okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
yeah, no big deal.
Yeah. It was cool because we don't have kids, and so we were in a position where, we could pretty much go anywhere. We did want to more go to the East Coast, but we
and then you discovered the 405. Is that what they call it, Jason?
Yeah.
You have to say the 405. It's not
That's it.
Route
The 405.
Yeah, okay.
You mean the parking lot?
Yeah.
And so, I was mostly living in Tucson, but flying to LA. And I did that for several months, and it was exhausting. I would fly on Sunday night and fly home on Friday. And so I'd have the weekend home. I had like 2 suitcases packed, one to go. And then, so one weekend I had where I didn't have to do laundry. And, we were in negotiations about whether I was going to have to move to LA. I was trying to, maybe we could, I didn't want to live in LA. I really didn't want to live right in Los Angeles.
And neither did Jason.
Can't say I blame you. It's a good place, but I totally get it.
Yeah. And, coming from growing up in a small town, Tucson, and living in Houston, which it is a big city, but nowhere's like LA. I mean, the cost of living
is very true. Yeah.
The pace at which everyone moves there. There's no mass transit, So, so we ended up just parting ways. I was only there for 6 months, but I learned all about projection, and that was really cool. It was really fun, and to see Stewart's manufacturing and the way they put, the attention to detail into their product. And, I got to see one of the first 4K projectors projected on a Stewart screen, and it was awesome. And I'm a nerd like that. So
that must have been, like 2012? No, that can't be right. Sometime in that time frame. Was that when you were at Stewart?
Yeah, when I was at Stewart, yeah.
Wow, because I'm thinking like 4K UHD didn't really start to take off until quite recently, the last couple years. So that must have been some like really early prototyping you were seeing maybe behind the scenes? I'm guessing.
I think it may have been a beta. It wasn't, a full production unit, but it was a Sony. It was a Sony 4K projector.
Cool.
Yeah.
Always fun when you can kind of, I don't know, get a little sneak peek at what's coming down the pike there, and that's awesome. So you were at Stewart Screen for a little while, and it just didn't work out. And your next step is where you are today, currently, right?
Yes. Yep.
So great. So in 2013, I think it was, you landed at Synergy CT back in Texas.
Yes. Yep. So back in good old Texas, we love it here. My husband's whole family lives here, and we bought our first house last year. So we're really settled, in this place. And I've been working for Synergy. It will be 2 years in October. And it was the first time I worked for an integrator. And, I called on Synergy and other integrators here in Houston when I was the national sales manager. And when I found myself coming back to Houston, I sought them out. Okay. I called them up and said, hey, I knew that they were a really good integrator. I knew their executives, I knew the way that they managed, and that they were, a good team of people. They weren't a super large integrator, which I liked. I liked working for smaller companies. And I said, hey, are you guys hiring a salesperson? And they're like, yeah, we'll hire you.
We are now.
Awesome. So
That's great. What's your, sorry, Nate, what, I'm curious as an integrator myself, and you kind of taking that trajectory in the industry, what's your feelings about working for an integrator now? Maybe some of the pros and cons.
Sure. So the pros are, every day is different. You never know what adventure you're going to go on. Like I said, every room is a new design. Everything's custom. It's really cool. And I really got to tap into some of those things that I learned at Beckler when I was doing tech support. I didn't know that I could work for an integrator. I didn't realize that I even had the knowledge. But it was like day one I started, and I was like, integrators really do what they've told me that they do. They have they have a design engineer, and they have a project manager, and they have techs, and it's like they have GCs that mess stuff up, and they have to tell an electrical contractor, 3 times what type of power they need and where. And, it's all these things that I had learned in meeting with these integrators. When I was with Beckler, it was like, now I was living it, and it was really cool. Let's go back to pros and cons. So when I was in sales for manufacturer, so Beckler and Stewart were manufacturers, you go out and your pitch is pretty much the same to every dealer or consultant, or you have one pitch for dealers and one pitch for consultants. I even had the same PowerPoint that I would, show at bigger meetings, lunch and learns. And it's, you're telling them about how they can integrate the product, what verticals it fits into, the features and benefits of the product, right? So that part of sales for a manufacturer is so different than sales for an integrator, because with an integrator, you don't know if you're going to be talking to who your main contact is at your client. Is it the administrative assistant to the CEO? Is it the IT director? Is it the CIO? So you have to have a different conversation with different people depending on who they are. And, you have to convince them to buy in different ways. And you have to, some IT, a lot of times I talk to the IT staff, IT support staff, or IT director, IT managers. Some of them are pretty knowledgeable in AV. Some of them not so much. So that was, it's not necessarily a con. It's just different. It's it's more challenging, and I find it a lot more enjoyable to, switch it up a little bit.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said too, like knowing what conversation to have with who. Like that is like an art in and of itself, because you have to know who you're talking to, right? And how they're going to process and make a decision, and what level of knowledge they have. And sometimes you just don't need to take somebody into the weeds, that they don't need to go there. They just need to know this solution is going to solve XYZ problem. Just keep it really high level. And then other times you got to dial it in, right? And really get down into the nitty gritty. So, but
yeah, I don't talk about foot lamberts with most people.
a wise choice.
Yeah.
Great. Now, earlier in the episode, or in our conversation today, you mentioned about mentoring. You brought up that word mentoring. So what role has mentoring played kind of in your career development? I mean, have you had like multiple people kind of investing in you and trying to help you make, good decisions? Or has there been like one person? Oh, I think I heard the dog. Was that the dog I heard?
That was the dog.
Well, we knew it was going to happen, right?
Yeah, it was inevitable.
So, so the dog how has the dog played a role in mentoring? No, but seriously, back to the question though. Did you have like one sole person that was kind of feeding into you and helping you out, or multiple people along the way? Like what has your experience been like with mentors in the AV world?
So it's definitely a mix of people, a handful of people that really helped out a lot, more long term. But I never really called it mentoring. That term was a kind of a new thing to me, and it was kind of a buzzword in our industry. It was getting thrown around, but I didn't even realize what it was when it was happening. It wasn't like I went to someone and was like, "Hey, I want you to be my mentor." And it just kind of happened organically, and it was probably the number one mentor was Pat Bray, who's the president of Beckler. Number two was also a salesperson who worked at Beckler. She's no longer in the industry, but her name's Deanna Wheeler, and she was a very good mentor. And she told me, off the bat, she's like, this industry is male dominated industry. It's fun. But you got to know the technology. And Pat, he really, I was young. I was 18 when I started, and he really took me under his wing and saw that I had a passion for learning the technology. And I still remember, with him and I sitting down in the conference room at our office, and he was explaining to me how a light pen, which was one of the annotation tools on the PointMaker, works in conjunction with a CRT monitor, and it reads the electrons off the CRT monitor and then sends a signal back to the PointMaker hardware to tell it where to insert the annotation into the video flow. And there've been other people here and there. I think again, it's just something that's kind of inherent in our industry, is that people want to help each other. It's
yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, it's hard. I'm trying to think. I definitely have people that I look up to and think of as mentors, though that word is probably never used. But like, I learn so much from different people that I'm working in close proximity to, and it's definitely, whether or not you have somebody who's a quote mentor or not. I mean, I think it's just important to put yourself around people that are smarter than you. That's kind of, you're not going to go anywhere if you're not doing that. So I think that's a key part of it too. But now,
yeah, for sure.
You mentioned the whole fact that this is a male-dominated industry, and we don't have to go too far into it. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is what was your experience like during this whole time where you're going from company to company, just being a woman in the pro AV world?
So, this is kind of a touchy subject with a lot of people. Um, for me personally, I didn't even really notice. I don't know that if it wasn't like blatantly pointed out to me and thrown in my face all the time that there's women are such a minority in our industry, I probably wouldn't have even thought about it too much. I always felt very respected by my peers, and I felt, I had good conversations with the integrators and consultants. They were always willing to meet with me. They were always, I would call them up or send them an email a few weeks or 4 weeks before I was go out to that area, fly out to their area and say, hey, can we meet on this day? And can I come tell you about the point maker? And, almost everyone was really accommodating. I know there are some veteran females in our industry that talk about the struggles and things that, they faced. And I'm sure, there's still some of that today, but I can't say that I really had a struggle per se. I feel like I just learned the technology, and, I always felt like I was respected by my peers, who all happened to mostly be male.
Well, good for you. I mean, it sounds like you're a go-getter, and you're very motivated, and that transcends gender, right? You can do that. So that's great to hear. And maybe it's a sign that things are changing, and things were bad at a certain point, and now they're starting to get a little bit better for women in the industry. So that's good to hear. It's encouraging, So definitely appreciate you taking the time to fill us in on your story, and I hope it helps some young professionals out there that are maybe just starting out or thinking about starting a career in the world of Pro AV or systems integration. And just thank you so much for chatting with us tonight. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's it. It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Nate mentioned my Twitter handle, Victoria0429. April 29th is my birthday.
There you go.
And reach out.
And you've got a blog called Victoria Ferrari's AV Adventures, right?
Yes.
Great. So you can look her up there on the old Google machine there.
Awesome. Yeah, and we will include links to that, of course, on the website at avshoptalk.com. If anybody wants to go check that out, get more information there, you can find all those links that we just referenced, as well as other links that we might have referenced throughout the show. Victoria, once again, I just want to echo what Nate said, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on to AV Shop Talk and join us. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Man, that was fun to do a more story-based thing, and I really enjoyed just kind of chatting with her and hearing, how she went from point A to point B and the reasons why, and that was really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. I'd be excited to do more episodes like this. I think that really, when you kind of dive in and you hear about people's journeys through the industry, a lot of what she said resonated with me. And, you and I are guys that have been in this industry now for a little while, but certainly not, old timers. But we've been around the block a little bit, and we've kind of seen a few things. And I think that really a lot of what she said just really resonated with me, like 8, 9, 10 years ago, somebody just getting started in the industry. And if there's anybody out there listening who happens to be in that position, I think really there's a ton that you could learn from what Victoria has been able to accomplish in the industry. And it's really not about necessarily coming into this business with a hugely technical background or being somebody that knows all of the ins and outs, but it's more about oftentimes just being that person who's willing to come in and really be dedicated and apply yourself and work hard and be good, working with people. And I think to me, that was really my main takeaway from the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Right. I mean, you don't get to go from, a receptionist to national sales manager by punching the clock and working a JOB from 9 to 5 and just trying to get home. You know what I mean? Like you've got to have some internal motivation and drive to do that. And so I think that was an inspirational story for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. So before we wrap things up, Jason, why is it important to get reviews in iTunes? I'm sure our listeners hear us say this all the time, but
yes,
how would you answer that question?
Yeah. Yeah. So we definitely want to echo that. I mean, we ask for it a lot, and there's a reason for that. And really what it comes down to is helping people find the show, and iTunes, just like Google or anything else, is at its core a search engine, right? And when you go to find a podcast, like before you and I started doing this one, I was searching around, and the way I found, some of the other ones I listened to, like AV Nation, and there's a few others out there, was just doing a search on iTunes. And the more of those reviews that we can get, the higher we're going to rank in those search results. And so, long story short, if you like the show and you think that more people could benefit from listening to the show, which we hope you do think that, the best way, probably hands down, that you could do that would be to leave us an iTunes review. Just takes 5 minutes. We'd really appreciate it. And of course, one of the other things, Nate, that you and I have talked about before, both on and off air, and I think gets underplayed and doesn't get talked about enough these days with social media and everything, it just plain old fashioned word of mouth.
Yes.
If you work in this industry and you have colleagues or friends that you feel like might be able to benefit from tuning into our show every month and hearing kind of a deep dive interview with a subject matter expert, or maybe one of our career spotlight episodes like we did this time, just tell a friend. I mean, that's a huge help to us, and that's how the name gets out there, and we truly, like, really, really do appreciate that. So we just kind of wanted to hit on that this episode and encourage people to go out and kind of help us spread the word a little bit.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate that. So we do thank you for telling a friend about the show, and we will talk shop with you in the next episode of AV Shop Talk. AV Shop Talk podcast is produced independently by Jason Griffin and myself, Nate Schneider. Musical contributions have been provided by Colin Owens. Voiceover contributions have been provided by John Perry. For more information, please visit avshoptalk.com/episode 20.